everyone, my name is Cindy from Bata and welcome to Hairapy Sessions with Cindy. At this point we've explored a few stories and experiences pertaining to hair and different experiences across the board regardless of race and religion and background, whatever other categories you want to use. And I think the common denominator, which is why I've wanted to explore this area in particular, is identity, and hair being very much tied to identity, particularly for women. And I'd like to share my story. So growing up, hair was very important. It was assumed that as soon as you could, you would start relaxing your hair and making sure it's chemically straightened. For those of you who might not know what that means, it's chemically straightening your hair. And it was a bit tricky for me because I've always had very coarse, tight coil hair, 4C hair, as those of you might know. And what that means is the coils are very, very, very tightly bound. And when I'd relax it, it wouldn't stay relaxed for very long. My new growth would start growing in quite quickly. And again, for those of you who don't know what that is, it means basically my roots would start growing in quite quickly. So that made it a little bit tricky. But I loved first of all, how I looked when I would straighten my hair. I loved just feeling how straight and sleek and silky it was. I loved being able to run my fingers through my hair, although it always made my hands very oily because of how much hair food and product went into it. I enjoyed just the way I navigated the world afterwards. I think it's been very interesting to watch the transition of a world and a community that has not been particularly kind to natural hair, transition into celebrating it. And there's been this amazing boom in the natural hair industry. It would be interesting to unpack that a little bit because, sometimes I'm a little bit skeptical about that boom and what it means. And personally, when I did wear my hair in an afro, I found it very stressful to stand in that hair aisle wherever I was. I won't name shops, but to stand in that aisle and trying to figure out what the best hair product was. And at that point there wasn't much information, and it forced me to be intentional about getting to know my hair for myself without the noise of all these different YouTubers pushing a particular agenda. I'm not saying all of them were pushing an agenda and trying to be paid, and that's not necessarily a bad thing either. But it just made it a lot more difficult for me starting out, especially doing that transition from relaxed hair to an afro. I didn't cut my hair at that point. I wanted to keep my hair, but I wanted to transition, which was a little bit tricky. Anyway, so going back to growing up and my hair experience when I was younger, relaxing my hair was the norm, and there were times when my mom would leave my hair natural, but I never wore it out when it was in its natural state. It was always in plaits, and there was just a sense of, not just from my mother and my family, but in general, there was just a sense that when your hair is in its natural form, it's too much. It's overwhelming. We don't know what to do with it. Let's just put it in a plait, because that's the only way we can deal with it. the particular messaging I'm getting at is it was seen as almost as a burden. So during that time, as a little girl, I remember being so obsessed with straight hair. And one of my sister's friends, her name was Monique. She had this beautiful, long, straight, jet black hair, like down to her waist. It was really long and beautiful. And I remember whenever she came over to visit my sister, I would just want to play with her hair and plait it and just see how it moved. I was fascinated by it. And whenever she wasn't there, I would pretend to be Monique, or I would pretend to have her hair, and I would put a scarf on my head, and I would just flick my imaginary hair about. And I've actually written a blog post about this. I'll put the link down below. And it was just interesting to see how, having very little experience in the world, I still gravitated to something I didn't have. I still gravitated to the stereotypical epitome and ideal of beauty where hair is concerned. In other areas as well, but particularly in this area. And I remember just, the grass is always greener on the other side, and just always wanting that kind of hair and that kind of like hair experience. At the end of my first year in varsity, I think it was either at the end of my first year or in second year, I started coloring my hair. So now I was consistently relaxing my hair. When I would do braids, I started experimenting with different colors. It was a nice time to experiment with different colors and hairstyles, I suppose, because obviously I didn't have that kind of freedom in high school. When I had decided to start coloring my hair, it was a nice time to try and figure out what looked best on me, and I think that time of my life was a very explorative stage where, in high school I had a very clear sense of identity, or what I thought was a clear sense of identity, and going into varsity, meeting new people, having new experiences, coming into my own, I felt the freedom and the ability to explore more with my look and my aesthetic. And then when I was in third year, I started having lots of rich conversations around identity and blackness and what it means to be black, what it looks like. And time again, in all these conversations, the idea of hair and wearing your hair in its natural state, or actually having the option, just being presented with the option, was mind-blowing. I had never grown up with the sense that wearing your hair naturally was just as beautiful as wearing it in braids, relaxing it, and wearing a weave or wig. I think there's something powerful about having the option. It wasn't an option. As soon as your new growth started growing in and coming in and messing up with the aesthetic of your beautifully sleek, silky hair, it just wasn't on. It just didn't work. There was a sense of, okay, now I need to get my hair done. I need to go to the hair salon. I can't be seen with my hair looking like this. And yeah, just lots of interesting commentary around that, where it's not just an internalized, I need to go get my hair done. People are vocalizing that you need to go get your hair done because your new growth is coming in. And I thought it was interesting to contrast that to the conversations I was having in second and third year of varsity about wearing your hair naturally and what it means for just embracing your identity, particularly as a black woman. And I loved the idea of just being given that option, having my mind open to that beauty is not one thing, that beauty isn't just the weave, beauty isn't just the relaxed hair, beauty isn't just the braids, beauty is the afro too. And I say that intentionally because there are also a lot of conversations where there's an idea that if you choose not to wear your hair naturally, if you choose the weave, if you choose to relax your hair, that makes you on some level ashamed of your culture, your cultural identity, your blackness. It's about having the option. It's about being able to express yourself along the spectrum of what beauty is, and being comfortable with that, and knowing that no one is going to judge you, just as much as people might have been not as celebrated for wearing their natural hair as they are today. I don't think people should not be celebrated for wearing their hair, for choosing to wear their hair in other ways. The point is that you have the option, you have freedom of choice, and I think it's beautiful when we're able to realize that and live in the fullness of that. So after having a whole bunch of conversations around hair and identity and beauty, I started seriously considering going natural, wearing my hair naturally, growing out an afro. And I remember this was the beginning of 4th year, my honors year. I remember just taking my braids out and making the decision that I was going to. And I remember the first time my mom saw me, she's like, "Oh, you took your braids out?" I'm like, "Yes." She's like, "When are you relaxing your hair?" I'm like, "I'm not relaxing my hair." Oh. And there was a little bit of a short circuit moment there. Yeah, it was interesting to see her reaction, and I said, "Listen, I'm gonna wear my hair naturally now. I'm gonna try and grow an afro." And it was really hard because I was transitioning from relaxed, straight, silky hair to super coily, super tightly coiled hair, coarse hair as well. Generally hard to manage hair. And all of that was happening on the same head. So the new growth grows in and it's super coily and curly, and you have this sleek, straight, very damaged hair. And I had also colored it, so the discrepancy of color and texture was an interesting one to navigate. But I looked a lot. I looked up a lot of resources on how to manage that transition, that hair transition, and it worked out. I mean, it took a long time for my hair to feel healthy and to figure out what products to use, and it was just trial and error. And then I went on a little journey to create my own moisturizing concoction that is completely natural. And I loved that because I knew exactly what was going into it, because what you put on your skin, what you put on your scalp, whatever you're putting on you is going to end up in your body. And I felt really good about knowing exactly what I was putting into my body, and that it was all natural, and it also smelled great, because I was very tired of using hair products that smelled like ointment. I just felt like it's so unfair that Susie's hair smells like apples and oranges and mine smells like a pharmacy. I really did not enjoy that. And then I was like, actually, why? Why does my hair have to smell like ointment? Let me just make my own. And I made my own, and it smelled amazing, and people would walk past me and be like, "Oh my gosh, you smell amazing, what is that?" And I'm not ready to reveal what that is just yet. But it worked for me, and it made my hair grow really nicely, and it was full and thick and lovely, and I enjoyed that part of my life. And I enjoyed rewriting the rules for me. Then we fast forward to the big chop. I cut my hair in 2018 in November. I had just turned 25, and a couple of weeks later I went to my sister. My sister is also bald, and she's been bald for years and years and years. To my sister, and I said, dude, just cut my hair. And she was like, oh, okay. No questions asked, and she shaved it all off for me. And I remember looking in the mirror and seeing and seeing it coming off, and just how dramatic of a moment that was for me. And I was really in a space of needing to shed away false identities, and I was in a very reflective phase of my life. I think birthdays do that to people, and I think when it's a significant number, so 25 was significant for me because it came with all these societal pressures and ideas of what 25 should mean and should look like. And I think in a way it was me trying to reject that and actively shed away the things that I didn't resonate with, the ideas and pressures and identities that I felt the pressure to live up to, that I just actually didn't want to. And I loved it, and then I hated it. It's really vulnerable. Cutting your hair, my goodness, is such a vulnerable space for a woman, particularly because of everything we're told and taught about our hair being our crown, and it being so tied to our value and beauty and identity in so many ways, so many intricate and subliminal ways. And I remember just sitting there and taking it all in and being like, oh my gosh, it's finally off. And my sister was like, psh, dude, okay, come, let's go eat. She had no time for my emotional processing in that moment. And I was like, I just need a minute. And then we took a few selfies and we sent some to my mom, and I couldn't stop looking at myself because it just felt so weird. And I remember walking home after that, and the very first person I saw while I was walking home is this girl I used to go to church with, and she looked at me and she said, girl, you look beautiful. You look oh girl. And she just affirmed me, and she was like, oh my gosh, I have FOMO now I want to cut my hair. And it felt really good to be in a space where I was super vulnerable, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I've made the right decision, because now as I'm walking, I'm just like, oh, everyone's looking at me, I look so weird. All these insecurities start flooding your mind, and just to have that met with so much affirmation from fellow sisters, oh my goodness, that was beautiful and wonderful. That feeling of feeling a little bit too exposed and vulnerable because all of this was gone, and also being flooded with some insecurities, thinking, oh, now there's nothing to hide behind, there's no hair to hide behind. Am I beautiful? Am I still desirable? Am I feminine? Oh goodness, the questions about hair and long hair being tied to femininity and what it meant for me now, all of those things came flooding in, And interestingly enough, I feel so much more feminine with no hair than I did with hair on. I don't know how to explain it. I think different aspects of femininity come out when there's less to hide behind. I think hair, adds to the femininity aspect quite a bit. But it allowed me to explore different ways my femininity can be expressed without the hair. Days after I cut my hair were very interesting because I felt there was a lot of this happening. Lots of ebbs and flows in terms of how I felt about myself, my self-esteem, the way I felt when I looked in the mirror really fluctuated. And I struggled with that. I struggled with receiving compliments. I struggled with other people's reactions. Not everyone's reactions were good reactions, and I think I struggled with that the most. It was interesting to see how, and I've always known that women's bodies are always subject to people's opinions, and we do it to each other as well, where there's a sense of your body not being your own because someone is always commenting on it. Someone's always commenting on whether you've gained weight, lost weight, if you're too thin, you're too fat, are you going to have a baby, when are you going to have a baby, how many babies. It feels like there's a sense that your body is communal, and people have the right to comment on it as they please. And I experienced that quite a bit. I've experienced that in other ways, but my goodness, I've never been so sensitive and aware of that as I was when the first couple of weeks after I cut my hair. And I remember almost going into protective mode of myself, and it was interesting to see and hear, particularly some men who were like, "Oh, what happened to your hair? What did you do to your hair?" It's like, I wanted to cut my hair. It's just hair. It grows back, and even if I don't want it to grow back, I like it. And being like, hold it. No, this isn't gonna fly. And I'm glad those experiences happened when I had made the decision to say, listen, I'm going to sit in this. I may feel insecure about it for now. I may feel uneasy about it, and I might still be trying to figure out what it means. But this is who I am right now, or an aspect of who I am. And I'm just trying to make sense of it. And if you're uncomfortable, that's your stuff. I will not be a part of that. I will not pick up things that don't belong to me, including your opinion of me. That's none of my business. What you think of me is none of my business. And I needed to almost say that over and over again to myself. And I'm glad that people came for me and my hair after I had started saying that to myself. So I was in a healthier space and able to take that on in healthier ways than I would have if they said that just after I had cut it. So the decision I had made, which was an important one, was to sit in the insecurity. About a week after I cut my hair, the high kind of wore off, and obviously the days after I cut it, there was a lot of this, lots of insecurity, and then feeling great about it. And it was great to have a community around me that affirmed me. That was really great to see and experience. But I also was very much aware of the fact that my deeply seated notions of what beauty and femininity and desirability all look like were complete polar opposites to what I saw when I looked in the mirror. And I decided to sit in that. I decided to sit in that discomfort, to be like, you know what? These insecurities were here way before I cut my hair. And if I just wait for my hair to grow back and I decide to hide behind my hair again, they will be there, regardless of whether there's hair on my head or not. They'll just be hidden by hair, and they will come out in all sorts of weird and wonderful ways if I don't commit to dealing with them now. And I made the decision to sit in that, to commit to myself and the journey that I needed to experience, to sit in the discomfort of feeling unattractive. I think everyone feels unattractive at some point. No one wakes up every morning and is like, you're such a babe. And there are times when, before that now, there were times when I did feel a little bit like a blob here and there. But there were times when I think consistently when I felt, Jesus did good here. And I've gotten to that point where I can now. But during that period, I would say for the first month or so, I've never consistently felt unattractive in my life. Consistently. Not just a bad day here and there. Consistently felt unattractive. And it was such a terrible experience. And it might sound vain, but self-esteem, what people say about us, what we allow them to say about us, what we allow in to our hearts and minds has such a huge impact on the way we navigate the world and how we treat ourselves and how we allow people to treat us. And often it's looked as something trivial, but self-esteem matters. My goodness, it affects everything in our lives. It seeps into every area of our lives. It has a way of playing such significant factors in who you allow in your life, in what ways you allow them in your lives, and how you allow people to treat you, and the things you think you deserve and don't deserve, and the way you carry yourself, the way you navigate the world. Self-esteem is important. It's not just some airy-fairy, feel-good quote here and there. It's a fundamental, impactful way of being that just infiltrates every aspect of our lives. And I needed to make a decision to commit to myself and commit to pursuing who God made me to be, and living in the fullness of that, and living in the fullness of who I am and everything I was created to be, and accepting that. And in order to do that, I needed to sit in the mess. I needed to sit in the discomfort. I needed to sit in feeling vulnerable and feeling ugly sometimes. And I needed to unpack what that meant and where that was coming from and where those lies were coming from. I needed to identify those as lies and replace them with the truth. And what that looked like was when I was tempted to put on makeup or to find ways to hide, and putting on makeup isn't always a way to hide. I still wear makeup. I really enjoy makeup. I enjoy wearing hats. I enjoy wearing jewelry. But there are times when I know I'm doing it to hide. And we all know when we're not feeling particularly our best and we just feel like, let me just put on some lipstick, let me just, and it's not in the sense of accentuating what's there, it's to hide behind it. And every time I was confronted with that decision to either hide or sit in it, I tried to choose to sit in it. And it can be the difference of a day. One day you can wear a full face of makeup, rock it, feel great, and it's not coming from a place of insecurity or hiding. And the very next day you feel like an absolute blob and you feel like makeup is gonna fix this. Literally a day apart. And it's important to, when you're feeling like that, find ways to not continue hiding. It's not always easy. I didn't always get it right. I still don't always get it right. But the more we do it, the more we lean into it, the more revolutionary it is and the more important it is for us and our self-esteem. I decided to commit to a year of it, and last year in November, I think it was the 16th of November, I hit a year of shaving my head, and I decided to reevaluate whether or not I wanted to grow my hair back, if the work that I felt like I needed to do to just sit in this and embrace who I am and to make sure that I feel beautiful in any form that I come in. I decided to reevaluate, and then I decided to commit to another 6 months, and that will end in June. End of June this year. And I've really enjoyed it. It hasn't always been easy, but I've committed to the process and I've committed to the messiness of that process. I think as human beings we run away from mess, but the human experience is messy. Human beings are mess, man. We're beautiful messes, but we're messes. And when we run away from the messiness of life and the human experience, it never turns out well. And I committed to that mess, and I'm still committing to that mess, and it's hard, but it's always rewarding. And I've really enjoyed this process and this journey, and I've enjoyed exploring what it means, not just for me, but for the people around me, particularly the women around me. And I feel a lot more like myself because there's less to hide behind. Not all the time, but for most of the time. And it's been interesting to see how I go through seasons where hiding behind something becomes more and more attractive. It's interesting to hear from other women who have cut their hair really short how they go to, putting on a little bit more makeup than they usually would, or putting a bolder set of earrings on just to detract from their face, to draw attention away from the things they don't want to be seen. And that's a daily fight, actually. And I think we do that in different ways. We all have things that we're insecure about. And I want this series to be about awakening us to what our insecurities are, and for us to be mindful of them and actively trying to replace those insecurities with truth, because often insecurities are tied to lies that we believe about ourselves. And I want to challenge us to actively seek out what the truth is in those particular areas and inject nuggets of truth in there. and be relentless about that. And often I've found that, particularly in the space that I'm in, where I'm surrounded by hundreds of teenage girls, and some will look up to me, and some look at what I do and how I carry myself and how I navigate the world, and perhaps one day I'll have a daughter or daughters. But wherever I am and wherever you are influencing people, and the way you feel about yourself, the way you speak about yourself, the things that you allow affect other people, even in the way that we choose to treat ourselves, in the way that we choose to believe lies about ourselves, in the way that we lean into insecurity rather than finding the things that we celebrate about ourselves. It's not always going to be easy. I don't believe in a superficial self-love, self-celebration on screen in front of people, but then when you're looking at yourself in the mirror, you're actively pointing out everything that's wrong. I'm talking about when no one is around and you're looking at yourself in the mirror. Do you look at yourself with disgust? Or can you properly slow clap Jesus and be like, you did a good job? And there's a difference between that and arrogance or being conceited. Because I have found that when we're in healthy ways celebrating ourselves and all that we are and all that we have been created to be, we almost give permission to the people around us to do the same. And it becomes this beautiful community where affirmation and celebration and love can thrive. So I challenge you to be kinder to yourself, to commit to the mess, to commit to being yourself, and particularly for the women, to know that it's not your job to be pretty. It is not your job. I'm excited to see what resonates with you. I'm excited to see the power of storytelling play out, the power of people being able to see themselves on a screen, to see aspects of themselves on a screen that they resonate with, that allow people to be like, oh my gosh, that's me in a different form, and I'm not alone, and I'm excited for this journey. Thanks everyone.